All right, we are back. Let's see. We started that out with Brand New Texas Hippie Coalition, Hellhounds. Then I tried to play two songs, and I forgot that this software, I don't know, it was playing FLAC and it wants MP3, so they didn't play. So then we played Anthem, Wheels of Fire, Motionless in White, Slaughterhouse, St. Damon with League of the Serpent, 69 Eyes with Call Me Snake, Code Orange Forever, Machine Head, A Thousand Lies, and brand new American Standards, The Vagrant. And joining us live from Phoenix is Brandon from American Standards. Brandon, thanks for joining us.
How's it going, guys? I'm here to pass. I think I'm 3 hours behind you, so you're a little bit later over there on the East Coast.
Yeah, so you got more daylight. We're getting a little dark here.
Although it is, I've spent a lot of time out in North Carolina for like the last several months, and it doesn't get dark out there till like 8:30 at night. Like it's ridiculous. I feel
Yeah.
like in Phoenix it's dark by like 5:30, 6 o'clock.
Now, you guys don't, are you,
There's no daylight savings time here. We just say screw it. Everybody else changes their time. We keep it the same.
you guys are the rebels.
Wow.
I wish we could do that.
Does it stay lighter later during the summer?
Yeah. Oh no, that stays yeah, lighter. Actually, no, it gets darker earlier in the summer. But the weird thing is, especially when we first started touring before like the internet and phones that had the internet on it, you would think you're making great time and you'd get to the venue and you're like, oh, I'm crushing it right now. Then you realize you lost like 3 hours on that drive to the time zone. And in Arizona, you never think of that. So you could be having a 5 hour drive, but really it's gonna take 8 hours out of your schedule.
Wow.
It's like 9:30. Oh, we got to do load in. Hurry, 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 hurry.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. You gotta do that time zone math that we don't think about it here in Arizona.
I know most interviews you do past, present, future. I know you and I talked. We want to do like a then, now, later type segment. We want to kind of keep it more lively than
Cool.
sad or whatever. So the band was formed in 2011. You guys are more of a hardcore punk. The one thing that stuck out was a guerrilla punk movement. Can you describe what that means for the band?
So I feel like you're pulling that from Wikipedia. I know that because we talked beforehand, which and that was the first time I'd ever heard that before. I've never heard that term before. But looking into that is, I mean, I think it's just because when we started, we had all been in bands where like being in a band full time was a dream. So like we were playing 300 shows a year. We were literally trying to make a living doing the band. And when we got out of those bands and we started American Standards, most of us didn't think that we were going to get it back into playing music and touring and releasing albums again. It was just, let's do something for fun and not think about like the opening up for big national bands. Let's just play at whatever random place we can book. So we booked all our own shows at random, kids' basements and the random like VFW hall and the storage attic that would let us rent it out for $30 for a night, and we'd put 5 bands in it. It was just wherever we could possibly plug in, we were playing at. And I feel like we built such a close community because of just people seeing bands in unconventional places.
Well, there was through a couple months now, we've been seeing lots of it, and actually after COVID, we started seeing things like that basement shows. Recently, and these are smaller bands, so I don't remember. One band played in a Subway, not like a
Yeah,
train, but like Subway. Jared, eating the sandwich.
yeah.
Played like on a double decker bus, I think in London, and the cops tried to pull them off. And we saw a punk show at a Denny's.
Yeah.
We
Yeah,
saw.
what's up, Denny's? Yeah, that guy is infamous now. Yeah,
So
I
I
don't know
guess
if you can curse on the program here, so I don't want to say the full term, but yeah,
you can.
it's smart, dude, because these bands are realizing that doing little things like that gets them more like internet virality. So it doesn't matter if there's only like 10 people that see that show, that lives on to the thousands or hundreds of thousands of people that see it online. Whereas you can play a show in front of 100 people at a traditional venue and then post it online, and that's not going viral. Like no one's going to talk about that. But yeah, you play inside of a Subway or Denny's or they've got that band based out of, I think it's San Francisco. We played with them a few times, and I'm struggling to remember their name, but they actually converted a bus into like a portable concert venue. So they play different cities, and they just open up the side of the bus, and then they just start playing in the city, and people go around it. And yeah, it's awesome, man. It's just cool to see bands like kind of getting back to what punk rock was all about to begin with.
That's when
I
you
don't
could
know.
take in your van and just go show to show, and that was it.
Yeah. Their band name is Hemorrhage. I just got it. Their band name is Hemorrhage. It came to my, like, I've got dial-up internet in my brain, so it takes a bit. But yeah, Hemorrhage out of San Francisco. We played with them about 8 or 9 years ago. Didn't hear from them again until like the last year. And then with TikTok, they started blowing up because they're just showing up to random cities, playing in front of big concerts. Like they'll park in front of a Slipknot show or something like that and just start playing out in the parking lot. And people are going nuts.
And it's interesting that you say that because, you know, no, I mean, any publicity is good publicity. So even like you said, if they played a regular show, who gives a shit? But I mean, you're reading this stuff on Loudwire, on Blabbermouth, and all these, major media outlets. So they're getting that exposure just for doing something punk rock like that, like you said, playing
Yeah.
at Denny's or whatever, So
And it gives you the ability to sound like trash. Not to say that all these bands sound like trash, but like when you're playing in a venue like that, like you're not supposed to sound like this big polished production with pyrotechnics and everything. Like you can have a video that someone's holding their phone of you playing at a place like that, and it will blow up. And regardless of what the sound is, people are just like, I want to see that, live.
I would think, like, I mean, you go to shows now, and everybody's got their, they got their phone up, and they're recording it
It's
from
Black Mirror.
sound check to encore or whatever. And I know a lot of bands like Maynard from Tool. If you pull your phone out, you get thrown out, stuff like that.
Yeah.
I kind of like this, having the more stripped down stuff, because it's more raw, it's more energy, like you said, So
Lets you live in the moment.
Yeah.
That's a problem now, is I just old man yelling at clouds. But I do feel like we're not living in the moment as much because we go there to film something that I could be like the minority in this, but I feel like almost every time I've ever filmed something at a concert, like I went and saw System of a Down a while back, and I did take probably like, I don't know, 5 or 6 videos or something over the course of their 4-hour set. And I've never once gone back and watched those videos. So like a lot of times when people are standing there for the entire set holding their phone up, I'm like, are you really going to go back and do anything with that? Like you're going to post 15 seconds on your Instagram and completely forget about it. Like actually live and experience that moment. Take out your phone for a little bit, but like I have no problem with that. But also like just be present,
And not for nothing, if I'm filming it, I can go on YouTube tomorrow and see the guy next to me who filmed it.
Yeah, you get every angle.
That's silly.
That's where I think kind of go into my comment about like bands sound like trash. Like we are a band that like we're a punk rock band at heart. Call it metal or hardcore, whatever, but like we plug in and play. So we're not focused on being the most polished sounding band. We're just trying to give people an experience, and we're throwing our guitars around and we're getting in the crowd and having a good time. But then when you watch it on YouTube the next day, it doesn't always translate because you're like, oh, that doesn't really sound really great. Like the crowd's having a good time, but it doesn't sound like the album sounds. But to me, it's like you're going to see a show live. It's not supposed to sound like the album every time,
I could push play. Well, I was gonna say push play on the CD, but I guess hit play on Spotify now.
Yeah.
So one of the other things that you guys started doing was the DIY CD distributions. I remember back. I mean, I'm 50. I don't know how old you are.
I'm almost 40 now, so
you're still a youngin, so to speak. But I remember going to shows, and like you said, you're out there, you're hitting the pavement, you have your street teams, you're giving out stickers and flyers and tape trading and things like that. Is that kind of what you guys were doing back then, just to get your, the message out?
Yeah.
Out there?
Yeah, so 2011 is a weird time because that's after the CD boom, obviously. Streaming started happening. Like sites like Bandcamp where you could download stuff was very popular. Like I think downloads was probably the primary way of getting music then, and then streaming came in shortly after. So our idea was like people were giving up on like just passing out physical flyers, like just paper flyers that you'd leave a concert and you'd see it on your car. People would be handing it out, and the compilation CDs. So our idea was really, let's like go back to the basics and like let's just get out there and hit the pavement and like talk to people in person, and being able to do that. So to us felt more real, and it felt like more of a connection to where a person actually cared. Because if we post online to our Facebook or whatever, people scroll, they see it for 2 seconds, they don't think about it again. But if we're at a show and we handed them a CD or we handed them a flyer, and we had a couple minute conversation with them, there's more of a chance that they would remember the band name, they'd remember who we are. and didn't know what we're about. So like we really wanted to focus on making that connection. I will say we bit off a lot more than we realized early on. So with like the first album, we said, okay, we're gonna do 500 physical CDs. So we're gonna burn these CDs. We're going to design the covers. We're gonna literally take paper and like fold it into the envelopes, and then we spray painted each separate with the vulture, our logo on there, and then we hand wrote each lyric. So every single CD had a handwritten lyric sheet in there. And we did that for 500 CDs, and it took us probably a week, 2 weeks of just like sitting, like, sitting in a circle, just listening to music, having a couple beers, and just writing all these lyrics out to hand out those CDs. But once again, to us, it was like, okay, like if this takes time and means something to us, maybe that'll translate to people,
Right. I mean, it shows the pride that you put into your product and stuff. I mean, now, like you said, TikTok makes or breaks bands anymore. A guy, somebody puts out a 30-second clip, and here's the new thing, and okay, I can hit a like. I liked it, but
Yeah.
you're taking the time, like you said, to make that connection, to speak to people. They're gonna remember that, like, oh, remember that guy Brandon, and so forth. That. So I'm always a big proponent of that back in the day. I wish they still did it now, but
Yeah. Yeah, we still, I mean, we'll do the paper flyers and stuff, not as often, unfortunately. The CDs are kind of there. If we give out a CD, it's a coaster essentially. It's we saw this period around 20, probably 14, 15, where we started selling more vinyl and cassettes than we were selling CDs. And I know damn well that people weren't listening to those cassettes, but I think it felt more of like a cool retro thing to like have as a collector's item or something. But yeah, the last few things that we put out, we've done very limited CDs just because we know we're just going to sit on them for a while.
So the self-titled came out 2011, 2012. You got picked up by We Are Triumphant and Victory, who at the time, I mean, we had some big names on there. We had All Out War, Amur is one of my favorite bands, Same Hatebreed, Warzone, Between the Buried and Me, Earth Crisis. I mean, Jesus, they started metalcore back in the day.
Yep.
Fighting the Bear, all those bands. So how did it feel that your self-titled, your debut, you're getting picked up by, a pretty prestigious label with bands like that? Were you like, holy shit?
Yeah, no, we thought we were getting trolled, to be honest, because at that time we had put out that 3-song demo that we did the 500 copies of, and then we had just recorded this Still Life album, and we had like some labels that were reaching out to us. Most of them were small DIY labels. There were a few larger labels, but they wanted like the 365 deals, which if you're not familiar with, it's like they take a cut of everything. They take a cut of your merch. They take a cut of your tour dates. They take like everything they've got their hands in. So we didn't really want to go with any of those. And then when this offer came about, we thought the same thing that you thought. It's like this label had some of our favorite bands growing up. But going back to that thought of like CDs are on the decline and record labels are trying to figure out how they could keep the profits where they were. It was a time that we didn't know, but in retrospect, I realized that the labels were dealing more in quantity rather than quality. So they were just signing as many bands as they could and hoping that one of those bands took off. Okay. So what that meant for a band like us was we were never going to be a Mastodon or a big metal band. That's just not our trajectory. We've got a ceiling with the style of music we do, and we're very aware of that. And although we try to expand it and get people open-minded, you're not going to hear us on mainstream radio by any means, So us getting signed, they knew that they weren't going to get that breakout band, and there's so little artist development that we were still, picking out our own studio, paying for our own recordings, booking our own tours, doing all our own promotion. And the only thing that we really got from the label was the occasional name association of them putting up a social media post, like essentially something that took them seconds and cost them nothing. Outside of that, they weren't even spending time to strategize with us. Like, how can we take the next step, So it felt like the exact same thing from the day before to the day after we got signed. Nothing really changed. I would say there maybe were a few shows that people might have took a chance on us because they didn't know who we were, but we were associated with the label, so they booked us. But we always went into that thinking like, once again, we're just still a small punk rock band from Phoenix. We're going to give this crowd everything we've got, regardless if there's 5 people there or there's 500 people there. And we've always had that mentality throughout the whole time.
So then is that kind of why when Death and Rhythm and Blues came out, is that why you guys kind of parted ways, that you just weren't getting the support of a label, and you were just doing, yeah, I mean, you were, like you said, you're booking your own shows and all that stuff. So what are we getting from a label?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, the only thing that we were getting was getting put onto a timeline that they had for us to then spend our time and money to get stuff to them. So, all right, we've got we've got to get an album in, 8 months, or we've got to get this music video done in 2 weeks. We've got to get pictures done in a week. Now you find a photographer, you find a videographer, you get the studio, you pay for all that, and then we'll take a percentage of it. So we weren't getting anything from it. And also, like, I mean, that was 13 years ago now. Although I was not young by any means, I was still like in my 20s, and I was still thinking like, screw these guys. Like, I'm putting in the work, and on the outside, people are giving you the credit for us getting any notoriety from it. So I still had that like 20-year-old mentality of like, fuck you guys. Why? Like, I don't want anybody to give you the credit for what I'm doing, assuming that you're doing anything,
Right. During this time, you had some festival appearances within these walls, Punk Rock Picnic, Southwest Terror Fest, playing with Guar, Danzig, DRI, Sick of It All, Red Fang. Did some of those bands, like, some of these bigger bands, they load in, play their thing, and leave? Did you're garnering some accolades from some of these larger bands, like, these kids can really play type stuff?
I would say, like, to be honest, like I would say about 80% of those bands, you're absolutely right. Like, they load in, you don't see them again until they play, they get off the stage, and you don't talk to them again. Or you might get like, hey, good set. And like, like you weren't even out there watching this set, So most of the time it was like that. But there were some bands that like stand out that definitely like went out of their way to like there's this band, not necessarily the size of like Guar, of the bands that you mentioned, but this band, Every Time I Die, that we've always looked up to. I mean, I've been a big fan of them since '98 when they put out Hot Damn. And I remember before we played, they invited us out to go have some drinks at the bar with them. Before we played, they they bought t-shirts off our merch. They gave us a vinyl of a new album that they had coming out a few weeks prior to then. So we got to listen to the album beforehand. We went back to the hotel and watched some professional wrestling, because Andy, one of their guys, their guitarist, is actually now a professional wrestler in AEW, big into wrestling. So we were sitting there and watching wrestling after the show. Like, called us out on the stage about how awesome it was and everything. So like, that was like for us just a moment where like, wow, this band that literally has kind of formed our sound in a lot of the ways, is then like just being the coolest band ever 20 years into touring, and weren't jaded one bit. So there were bands that stood out like that, or like Norma Jean, very much in our genre. We've probably played with them a dozen times or so, but every time they come through, if we want on the show, we know we can get on the show, like, because we always, make good with the guys and everything.
So for all the Glenn Danzigs out there, you had a few guys that would help you out. So that's good.
Yeah, I bet you. I mean, I'm sure you probably heard the story of Glenn Danzig and his history with Arizona, but him letting another Arizona band on a show is fairly not few and far between, because of the guy from Where Eagles Dare here in Arizona, a local band that punched him during the set. So we had to playing with Misfits is definitely something where like they're probably hesitant about playing with another Arizona band.
All right, so then we moved on to Hungry Hands, about 2014, 2015. Around this time, you guys explained that this album would be your most dynamic experimental album to date. Expressed the new lineup was finally finding the right mix. So what attributed to this? Was it just more cohesiveness? Was Steve joining bass? And at that time, you had Corey Corey moved over to guitar at that point, right?
Yeah. So it was I mean, as you go through this, it just makes you realize how many member changes we've had throughout this time, especially on the drummer side. But kind of going back to that first thing I said about, we really didn't plan to be a band that recorded albums and toured. That changed really quickly in that first year, where when we stopped trying to be a band that was like doing it as a full-time thing, then people actually wanted us to do that. So now we're getting label interest, and now we're being asked to record albums and do music videos. And a few of the guys early on that started the band with us, they didn't want that at all. So when that started happening, they started pulling back more. And this dumb part in my head, and I think in Corey's too, but I won't speak for him, saw that glimmer of hope again of like, hey, I didn't want to do this full time, but like now we're actually not trying, and we're actually getting all these huge offers, we're playing with bigger bands than we've ever played with, and getting all this stuff. So it really felt like with Hungry Hands going into it, we had everybody that really the dream and the passion was once again like, let's go hit the pavement, hit the road, and do this at the biggest possible level that we could. And then recording that at not Flying Blanket, Drooping Rug, I believe that was recorded at with Andy Marshall. He's a friend that I'd played in bands with in the past. He understood the style, and we were no longer on the clock because a lot of ways, especially at that time, studios were charging you per hour. So when you've got a finite amount of money like we do, because we're not making money doing a hardcore band by any means, it was always about like, what's the best product we can get out with the amount of time and money that we have to do it. So recording with Andy was, you actually got, within reason, a lot of time to just spend in the studio and experiment with tones and like do stuff that you probably wouldn't, I don't want to say waste of time, but have the time to spend doing otherwise. Right. So that was one of the most fun recording experiences that I've had. I would love to remaster that album and really bring out a lot of the stuff to make it sound a little more punchy and a little more powerful. But what we did with that, to me, was just the most fun recording experience I've ever had.
One of the other things that I read, so Corey does the album and the merch, the artwork, and you guys try to tie all that into your music videos. So do you lay? I'm assuming you're laying down the lyrics first, and then the story tells itself, which turns into the videos and the artwork and all that. So how do you intertwine all that to make it that cohesiveness?
Yeah, we've got really like two parallel paths that are always happening. It's one is like my notepad. I'm always every day writing stuff on a notepad, lyric ideas, song names. I mean, if we're having a conversation, you say something that sparks like tickles my brain, I'll put that down on a notepad, and then later on might come back to it. And then Corey's always writing guitar riffs. Right. Corey is very much like a riff soup type guy where he writes 100 riffs and tries to jam them into one song. And then I've always been the guy, even from the start, like I wanted this band to be a very, like, how heavy can we be, but still have memorable, catchy parts. Right. I'm not belting out these big choruses like a lot of metalcore bands are, where it's like, here's the screaming verse and here's a big singing chorus. But how can we still make these songs memorable and make you want to go back to it where it's catchy? So when Corey has all these riffs and I have all these lyrics, we then get together and I say, okay, this riff deserves to be played more than 4 times. Like, let's come back to this riff. And these lyrics resonate with it. And then once we get into the studio, that's where that kind of cohesive story really plays. So I tell Corey, this is like what the idea I'm trying to get across with this. How do we artistically, from what you're painting or drawing, portray that in the album artwork or in the merch that we do for it?
So I wanted to ask Corey, I can read music, but I don't play any instruments. So I'm wondering how difficult it is to move from bass to guitar. So, you're just dealing with normal chord progression. Yeah. And now you have to write, like you said, catchy riffs and things like that. I don't know if you can answer that for him. Was it like, all right, do this, motherfucker? Like, you're going to learn.
Yeah. I can't answer for him, but I will say two things on that. One is Corey, when he first tried out for American Standards, I didn't know this until maybe 7 years in. We were literally sitting at a pub doing an interview, and Corey told this story, and it was the first time I had heard the story, that when we posted on Craigslist looking for a bass player, he that day went to Guitar Center, bought bass equipment, and then came and tried out for the band. So he had never owned a bass. He had played like here and there, but never had really owned a bass or a bass amp. He just went to Guitar Center, bought this stuff with the idea like, hey, if it doesn't work out, I'll just return it. And then to make that story even crazier, he tried out, and that day we were playing this festival, and we had a photographer coming out from the Phoenix New Times, which is like a newspaper here in Arizona, and they were going to do a photo shoot of us. And it's so funny hearing him tell the story. And he says that I said this. I don't remember it, but I think it is something I would say, and I think it's hilarious. He says that I had the idea of, okay, we got this photographer coming out in a couple hours. We just tried out this bass player. We took one set of photos without him and one set of photos with him, just in case it didn't work out.
Or not, yeah.
And the photos they ran in the newspaper were without him, but we still had the photos with him too.
So then, like in the liner notes, it said bass to be determined.
Yeah, right. So to answer your question, he didn't even play bass before he joined the band. And then when Cody, our initial guitarist, had passed, and then Brennan, our second guitarist, moved on to other bands. Corey just kind of without hesitation said, you know what, if anybody's going to do this, going to be the primary songwriter, to keep this the same, especially since at that time it was really just me and him as the original members. He needed to take a bigger position in the band in terms of songwriting to keep like what our initial vision was for the sound. So he moved to guitar, and I'm sure he had played a little bit before then, but he picked up very quickly. He's kind of like a jack of all trades guy. Like he's just good at what he does, you know? And then we jumped into writing Hungry Hands, and those 3 songs were the first time he had ever played guitar for American Standards. And those were all just things that we came up with in the course of a few months.
Also, I want to touch on, so for Hungry Hands also, part of that was Kickstarter funding, right? You guys got like for that. So how does that work? Like you said, the band members like, I don't know if I'm gonna do this, and now you're saying, well, shit, now fans are paying us to put out
pressure, right? Pressure, right? So we had the idea of recording. It was in California, and we were in Phoenix. So it was this, okay, to do this right, we want to record at this studio. We want to work with these people for the videos and everything. And we are no longer on the label, obviously. So we were just like, how can we put out something that, you know, meets our expectations and lives up to what the fans are expecting of us? And Kickstarter, I mean, it had been around for a while at that time. But I feel like it doesn't have the connotation as much that it has now. So we're like, maybe we can do something with Kickstarter that doesn't feel like asking for like handouts or donations. And I will tell you, I would never do it again. It was great, and I'm so grateful for everybody that backed us and everything that we did. But because we were so like, I don't know what the word is, timid about it not being a handout, we offered so many perks and giveaways that essentially you were just buying the merch at a little bit above the cost it took us to make the merch. And we had to have so many backers to be able to make that work. So we spent so much time not only packaging up all that merch, making all the merch, making sure we had the right sizes and, you know, sending it out, but also the time between when we got it back and when we were recording. So many people had moved, or like we got so many kicked back packages. So then we had to like track who got their package, who didn't get their package, and all that. So it became a very like administrative like task of getting that done. But we felt really good about it. What we put out, like, I'm super proud of. The only other thing about that, I'll give you like the tidbit. I don't even know if we've ever really even talked about this, but the videos for that, we have one video now that's on YouTube for Casket Party, but not the initial vision at all of what it was supposed to be. We went back to the guy that recorded the Harvester music video, which is our first music video. And I thought Harvester was a great video. It wasn't necessarily 100% what our vision is, but as with any type of art, when you're working with people outside of yourself, like, it's always a compromise where you land. But I really love aesthetically how that video worked or looked. So we had this big vision of making these 3 music videos, one for each of those songs on that EP. And it was a linear story. So each video told us the story, and then we'd release each, you know, a month apart. Unfortunately, we gave that videographer all this money that we had raised to shoot the 3 videos. And then he shot some live videos and some stuff without us, or live performance videos and some stuff without us. And then he fell off the face of the earth for like 6 months. Wasn't responding to any calls, any texts, anything we were messaging him on any social media. And then he sends us the video that we have up for Casket Party. And it was the furthest from what we had talked about. And he had a lot of things that he said, like, this is going on in my life, this and this and this. We're like, we understand, but like, we didn't even hear from you for like 6 months, man. And then we're like, can we still salvage this before we release the video and make some type of 3-part story? And then once again, we didn't hear from him. I don't think we ever actually heard from him again since then. So we spent all this money, all this time. We got a video that wasn't necessarily what we wanted. And it was like, do we put this video out as it is, and it doesn't have the other 2 parts? What do we do with this? So we did put the video out as it is, but very far from what the initial vision is. Like, I don't hate it, but I have this like sour tinge in my mouth from like, this could have been like so cool. This
doesn't tell the right story. You had one job.
yeah. And then having that pressure that you mentioned of like, Kickstarter, people had backed us recording in California and filming these videos. Like, we've got to put something out here, you know? So.
All right, 2016 to 2017, we have Anti-Melody, more do-it-yourself tours at this point now where we're Knocked Loose, Sleeper 68, Wings of Plague, and Rings of Saturn. I play Knocked Loose and Rings of Saturn all the time. Love those guys.
Nice.
Uh, so here's a quote, and this is like I'm saying. So some of these quotes that you have are they're very inspirational. So, quote
Thank you.
unquote, what started as social commentary on the growing divide in our society became very personal when our founding guitarist, you spoke, Cody, passed of suicide, and then soon your father passed away of cancer. We went back in to rewrite much of the album, and in a lot of ways, use it as therapy to cope with the experiences. Although intimate at its core, Anti-Melody is centered around the universal theme of separation on many levels. So I'm assuming at that time, obviously, it was a solemn period, but was it cathartic to go back in and re-record with those experiences? Was it one of those things like, Chester passes away from Lincoln
Lincoln
Park.
Park, yeah.
The band keep going. Same with Taylor Hawkins and the Foo Fighters. Do they keep going? So is that what was going on in your mind? Like I'm done, or Cody would want us to keep going. My father would want us to keep going. Was it that type of process?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it was a weird time because it definitely I feel like because we don't put out music as often as a lot of other bands where it's like every couple of years you got an album, and especially the amount of music we put out, like it's 8 songs and then 7 songs and then 5 songs, and so there's these big gaps, and during that time we had this another just weird experience where like we went into the studio, we had this huge vision of like the studio we went to was King Size Sound Labs. They had recorded Mars Volta and Bad Religion and all these legendary bands, Let Live. So we're spending more time, more money than we ever had. And then, Cody passed away, and then my father passed away literally within like a month or 2 of each other. And we thought like, what do we do? What do we do with all the progress we've already made, And this, like, I think at that time, Corey and I talked a little about do we just pack it up or do we keep pushing through? And the idea in our head came like one word, which was like perseverance. Like if there's any theme of this band, it's like perseverance and trying to make the most of your circumstance. I'm a strong proponent of the idea that like you can't control like what happens in your life 100%, but you can control the way that you react to it. So in this case, the way we want to react to it was let's take what we've got, the bones of these songs, and rework them in the best way that we can. So I didn't even at the time realize that if you played that, I know it's only 7 or 8 songs, but if you played that as like a vinyl and there's side A and side B, like one side is very socio-political and political. Like we're right in the deep of an election year, and a very divisive election year. And then the other side is very emotional and what was going on with Cody and my father and everything. But both was like this separation, like politically and culturally, everybody is separating and taking black and white sides with little gray or nuance. And then on a personal level, literally separation of losing a family member and a good friend. So it like that, the album is so hard for me because I look at it and I think like I've never wrote something that means so much to me lyrically. But because we had to like swerve halfway through this, and we were in a studio that was very expensive and we couldn't use unlimited time like we did in the past, it was how do we pull something out of this situation? And once again, I think the lyrics, the meanings behind those songs, I've never done anything better personally. I think sonically we've recorded things that sound punchier and bigger and more polished. But it had like we just had to put it out as it was, like as raw as it is, because that's just like what we were feeling at the time. It's just like, let's make this as honest as we can. We literally took the recordings that the studio gave us because we couldn't afford to stay in the studio, and we self-mixed that album, our drummer and us, kind of along with him having the technical expertise and us using our ears to say what we thought sounded fine. And we just tried to own as much of the album as we could.
I mean, it sounds almost, I don't want to say concept album, but side A is, like you said, the hard hitting stuff, and side B is more from the heart. Is that the parts that you went to rewrite? Meaning, is that what you intended to have, the two separations from tracks?
Yeah, I think for the most part, yeah, we did. I mean, I knew I had to write about what was happening like culturally and in our society at the time. Just because I've always been this guy, like not to get super heavy into politics, but I've always been this guy that thought like there's always nuance in every situation, and every person is going into any situation, political or not, with what they think is the best intentions in mind for them, for their family, for their friends. And once you understand a person's intentions, then you could have a more productive conversation. And I knew I had to write something about that because I feel like everything that was coming out around that time, and a lot of what's been coming out since that time, is you're right, you're evil, or you're wrong, you're evil, like you're not even human. I'm right, I'm like godly, and there's no discussion in this. And although there are a lot of fucking evil people that deserve to be called out on it, there's a lot of people that are ignorant, might not be the right word, but a lot of people that you can still have a conversation with and be productive. It's not as black and white. So I had to write about that situation, but and 3 or 4 of the songs are about that. But I also had to write about Cody and about my father. And there's a song called Danger Music #9 about my mother, who is now in a facility that takes care of her. She's fairly young. She's in her late 50s. Everybody there is in their 80s, 90s. But because she's a product of our medical system, where they basically prescribe pills and try to alleviate the symptoms, but never think about the cause, and they're incentivized to get you in and out as quickly as possible. Just all of her organs are gone to shit. And I had to write about that as well, because I felt like that was a very big part of what was happening there at the time. So when I think like conceptually, I do think there's a concept to it, but I think that concept almost takes a backseat to the fact that this was all like naturally what I just felt like I had to do. And then looking at it in retrospect, I think actually a good friend, Dan Terry, he's in a podcast now called DFT's Dungeon, used to be discography discussion. He kind of gave me that idea. It's like, I listened to this album on week 1 and it immediately sounded like you wrote side A is this and side B is that. And I said, you know what, like not necessarily intentional, but maybe subliminal,
Right. All right. So next we have Pendulum Podium. These were the last shows that you played before the pandemic hit, and we know everything went to shit there. So you guys started doing some live streams, charity events to help the local businesses. I know Haley and I, we just went off the cuff on watching live streams. We had Metallica, we had Korn, Cradle of Filth, Avatar, Lamb of God, Anthrax, Butcher Babies.
Nice. We've done shows with Butcher Babies, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we see them in August.
Yeah,
right?
with Mudvayne and Cold Chamber, so that's going to be
nice. I hear Mudvayne's coming back with a new album. That'll be interesting to hear. That LD50 album, that's peak up there for me.
We saw them last year. They opened for Rob Zombie, and some bands, it's a tough listen if you don't know them. And I think Mudvayne was ahead of their time back then. It's like you said, LD50 was fantastic and all that stuff.
Hey, I will not take Chad's slander, but he is getting older and he's struggling a bit to get all those syllables out.
Yeah, gained a little weight, unfortunately,
Yeah.
So I mean, I also do a punk rock show on Sundays with a guy I went to high school with. He's the punk guy. I'm just there to look better than he is. But I talked about the live streams, and he's like, "No, I want to see a show." I'm like, "Yeah, but if you couldn't, at least you're seeing that the bands are still trying." And the coolest thing that I thought was the merch that they had.
Yeah.
Like the Lamb of God one we saw, it was just that show, like that shirt. So it had that date. They had autographed posters. You had commemorative tickets and shit like that. So, so if you could talk about some of the live streaming you did for the charity or your businesses, keep them, because around here, gone, business gone, same thing.
Yeah, no, I was maybe not surprising from kind of my previous statement of like, when you watch us on YouTube, our live shows, they're not going to sound like the album. So I was always a little hesitant about doing the live streams, because I've seen so many live streams that the sound just wasn't great. It felt, if it was just one stagnant video, it's like that doesn't move very much. It's hard to be a band that's so chaotic and thrives off the crowd and just see a still shot. Like you've got to have movement in it. So I was a little bit against it. We got asked to do a lot of ones that weren't for any good cause outside of us just wanting to play again. And we said no to a lot of them. And I think the first one that we said yes to was actually at the Den in Prescott. And I love the sound on that one. I think what they did with the video and all the cuts looks very aesthetically pleasing. So I would recommend, if you want to see a good interpretation of what we sound like in one take live, watching that Den live stream on YouTube is a good one. But that was for a guy that literally he was a guy that had been in multiple bands in the scene. He had a studio, and he had basically took his life savings and he bumped it into starting this music venue. And he had this vision of not only a music venue, but in the back having a cool skate park, having a coffee shop in the front so it could be open during the day. And I know when I hear, at least if you were telling me the story and I hear this, I think I know a million people like that. And I'm picturing the venue, and it's such a shitty punk rock version of what it actually sounds like. But this was beautiful. Like this was better looking than 99% of the venues we play at. He put so much time, money, and heart into this place. And he did it right before the pandemic without knowing. So that meant that right when he was ready to open doors, he then had to be closed for a year and a half. And he spent that entire time continuing to dump every cent that he had into this place. So when we found out about that, we really wanted to do what we could for him to keep it open. We knew with his history and recording and everything that he'd be able to put out something that we were proud of. So that was our first live stream, and that kept them open. Not only kept them open, but kept them open up until, unfortunately, just about a month and a half to 2 months ago, where they did unfortunately have to close doors, which was because of they were continually getting hit with different, I guess, licensing type things. And I don't know the technical aspect of it, but essentially what I feel like I've heard it boiled down to is they were just, they couldn't afford to keep putting the money into it that they had to keep the vision alive. But they had a good year plus, if not a year and a half, of shows that were just awesome shows in a small town, Prescott, Arizona, which is about an hour and a half north of us. And the kids have nothing to do. Like the kids literally have nothing to do. They have to drive an hour and a half to Phoenix to do stuff. So having this place became like this spot where it didn't matter what band was playing. Like everybody was there. They were always 100 people at the shows. They all like were just having the times of their life, and they were doing a lot for the community. So it was just a vision that we really stood behind. So that was the first one. And then I think we did a couple more. We did one at the Nile. I don't think the sound was fantastic there. But I will say the Nile is one of the first venues that gave American Standards a place to play. When bands like Sick of It All were coming through, they would ask us to play at these shows that were just like beyond like why is a band like us playing with these legendary bands? So when they asked us to play it, we were super stoked, and we're like, it doesn't matter what it sounds like at this point. It's just like let's do something awesome for this venue that's done so much for us in the community over the last 10 years.
Cool. Okay, so the new one out is Dopamine Dealer. So this one, I think I read about this band, or I don't know. The one festival, we had a farewell show with the Oakley Dokley.
Yeah.
There was a Guinness Book of World Records, the most people dressed as Simpson characters in one place. Did American Standards take part in this? Meaning, did you guys dress?
We absolutely dressed up. It was for the Guinness Book of World Records for the most Simpsons characters in one room. And Oakley Dokley, we played their album release a little bit after they went viral for being the Simpsons Ned Flanders themed band. Great guys, all used to be in very super talented, very awesome bands. And then they kind of, as a joke, took a picture as Ned Flanders, 5 guys standing as Ned Flanders without any music out, and it went viral. So then they like immediately wrote music for it, and surprisingly chose to be like a hardcore screamo band, which to me like would be the last thing I would think is like be like a pop punk band or something that could like. But they got so big that they were on a Simpsons episode. And I've been a fan of the Simpsons since the 90s. Like anything season 1 through probably 8, I've seen a million times. Every House of Horror is like my shit for sure. So like doing a show where everybody dressed up as Simpsons characters was just awesome. And then on top of that, they had, I think 700 people dressed up as Simpsons characters, and people that generally come to see a band like us. Nor their crowd, I would argue, don't always go to see a band like them either. They're kind of in it because of the internet meme of it. And playing for that type of crowd is so much fun because, like, if I'm playing with Every Time I Die or Norma Jean or bands that sound like us, the crowd has largely heard a band that sounds like us before, and they might not be as impressed to see a local band opening that show, you know? But you play for people that are either some of these people at the show were well into their 50s, 60s and older, and some of the people at the show were like under the age of 12. And all of them were there for this fun event. And you can really change someone's life from that, because that's exactly how my life was changed. I remember going to a local show when I was probably 14 years old and seeing this band on stage and seeing the crowd go crazy and thinking, this band is fucking horrible. I can do this. And so I go into it with the same mindset of like, if I could be that band on stage and I'm playing in front of a crowd that's never seen anything like this, I can be so good that I make people think, wow, I would love to do that. Or I can also be so bad that people think I could do that. And either way can change your life, because seeing that band when I was 14, being right up against a speaker because I'm under 21 and like just being blasted with the most obnoxious, horrible noise, made me now play with American Standards over 600 shows. I think we were on in total. My first show was in 2001 or 2002. So I've probably done a few thousand shows and traveled the world doing this. Not because I have any sort of talent, because I will not ever say that I have talent doing it, but I've got a lot of drive and a lot of perseverance. And my life was changed from that one moment. So I always look like shows that like playing with bands like Oakley Dokley or bands that are completely different than us. Like, can I just wow this crowd and make them have some type of reaction?
That's cool. All right, we have another quote here, and this one kind of hits. I like this one. Quote unquote, our society breeds a culture that convinces people they don't have enough. We've been convinced to chase happiness in the form of material possessions, social status, and an unpromised future. You're alive now, savor it. If that doesn't kick the snot out of Facebook, and I swear, like,
yeah, right.
oh my God, you want to talk more about on that one?
Yeah, dude. I sometimes like I'm guilty of it too, be just scrolling Instagram or TikTok or whatever else, or Facebook, and just people that I know are not like, they're a completely different person online, and they're doing it for this way that like sometimes I get viscerally like mad about it, and I don't know what's in me that makes me mad. And then sometimes I get to this point of just like sadness, like, why do you have to like shake your Starbucks cup on Instagram every day? And no hate to the people that do it, but it's like, what do you get out of that? You get a couple likes or something, and what does that translate to? Or like you're the person at the show that has your phone up for the whole 3 hours of the show, and you haven't watched it through anything other than your phone screen, just so you can post it online and get some people to say like, just live in the moment for a bit, you know? Because at the end of the day, like, the number of likes that you die with, you can't exchange those for Tootsie Rolls and Army Men and like little parachute guys or anything. Like, there's no gift shop that you're exchanging these likes for. Like, these likes equate to the time that you spend. So for me, it's just like, be authentic, be genuine. I get like wanting to make people laugh and entertainment. That's a thing. But like, there have been points even in the journey of this band where I realized I'm spending too much time on the wrong things in this band. I think 2017 with Anti-Melody was a good example. Like, if you look back through that time frame, I probably did, I don't know, like 200 podcasts, and I spent countless days, if not weeks, responding to every email, interview, and everything, because I didn't have it in me to say like, for something in me made me just say like, I've got to put everything out there and I've got to do everything. And not to say I don't love doing that, and I've had so much fun doing that too. But like, I realized I was spending so much time doing stuff that like, what am I getting out of it? Like, the music to me is what matters. The message is what matters. I want to connect with people. But if I'm just doing it because I want to post like some witty like quote or something like that, like it's not as fun anymore, you know? So.
Yeah, I mean,
so now I try to find balance. I love doing this. I love talking to you guys. I try to find the balance of doing it. Like, I can do one of these a day or one a week or something, but I don't try to burn the candle at both ends anymore. Just saying like, to oblivion, I have to get everywhere, because I didn't feel any different when I did that as opposed to when I didn't do that, you know?
We'll be laying in bed, and I'm trying to go to sleep, but I feel the the screen burning my retina out, and I look over, and here she is. I'm like, what are you doing? She's like, oh, she's so fake. Her husband.
Yeah. It's this feeling in you that's just like, what makes you so angry at that like, and then they like this, I try to question myself as like, maybe this truly makes them happy. And then I'm like, am I kidding myself? Like maybe they're just really sad and they need that self-validation. And then this other third part of me says, who cares what the answer is? It's not me. So like scroll. I don't need to say or do anything, you know?
I hated Twitter when it first, like, you know, people like, I'm at the gas station, I'm taking a shit. Like,
yeah, right.
Who cares? My God.
Yeah. It's funny. I think I told you I've been traveling so much lately. I was talking to some friends that I haven't talked to in a few weeks. And they're like, yeah, I haven't seen you in like a month. You want to go grab a beer? And I was like, I'm out of town. They're like, how long you been out of town? I'm like, I've actually been out of town for like the last 3 or 4 months or something, but I just haven't really like I've been coming back on weekends. I just haven't like people, I haven't even been telling people I'm traveling, and I've been going out and doing stuff every night, but I'm just like, I'm no longer the guy that feels like I have to post that I'm doing it. And not to say that I'm better or worse than anybody. It's just, I didn't even acknowledge that I wasn't telling people that I wasn't out, that I wasn't back home, you know?
It's because of that Arizona time zone. You don't know what day.
Yeah, right. Yeah, when it's like, people are getting off work and it's 10 p.m. in Charlotte, but it's like, 7 back home.
So when you and I started, we were talking about when we're going to schedule this, and I went to your Facebook and I read that long post. I was like, holy shit. I'm like, dude, what happened? Did I miss the boat here?
We thought you were like the videographer.
Oh no, it just ghosted you. No.
Ghosting everybody, yeah. So, right now you guys are talking about a final album going out with a bang, end of the road tour. What's next? Are there any possible side projects? What have you learned from this experience? And do you have any advice for bands coming up?
Yeah. I guess to start with the beginning from that, I think, so there were so many road bumps along the way, and so many times where we thought like, it's much easier to just call it quits here than to keep going. And each time we decided to keep going. And typically at the other side of each of that, it was always these great experiences, meeting new people, traveling and doing all these things that I have so many great memories from. But there were lulls where we're like, okay, like, do people even care about what we're doing for the amount of time? Do people even care anymore? And especially during a pandemic, it was like this period where like we weren't even seeing each other for practice, let alone were we playing shows. And it made me realize like a lot of the stuff that I enjoy about doing the band, I can still do without the band. And a lot of the things that we had as goals going into the band, I'm now able to accomplish because of the band is giving me that platform to do it. So starting the band, we knew we always wanted to do it for a good cause. We knew that we always wanted to, for example, suicide prevention, even before Cody, was always a big cause to us. Now, obviously, with my father from cancer, there's a few different nonprofits there. But we always wanted to say, okay, we could make a few $100 from this show, but realistically, get us a hotel and some gas, and we're going to donate the rest to charity. We're going to organize these volunteer events and these compilation albums for charity and things like that. So those are all things that are very important to us early on. And now that I've kind of got somewhat of a platform with people that have been following me for all this time, I can still continue to do that even without the band. I personally, on personal level, I came from a family where my mom and dad broke up fairly early in life, and my brother was 10 years older, so he was out of the house by the time I could really remember. So I was always like searching for this family or connection that wasn't there. So like being in the band kind of created that. And the extended family of all the people that we've met over the years, that every year we play their city a couple times a year, and we get to see them for the last decade plus. So I now feel like I've got so many friends and family that I can continue to go visit and see them even without the band, and then I guess like the last thing on that is, at the time, especially in Arizona, the scene was so set in as like, if you're death metal, you play with death metal bands. If you're punk rock, you play with punk rock bands. If you're, Norwegian metalcore, you play with like, it didn't matter what the niche was, you stuck to your own. And we always wanted to be that band that could put on these like mixed genre shows and show like, if you have high energy, you could win over any crowd. And I think we try to do that a lot with our recordings and definitely with all our shows. I mean, most recently we had the Got Samaritan, which does kind of the rap spoken word part in the Tourist, one of our more recent songs. It was always about like, we want to play with people that like when they're playing, they could be like the Linkin Park, where maybe this person's only into hip hop, or maybe they're only into metal, but then they listen to this and it changes their trajectory. Like bands like System of a Down did for me, or like Rage Against the Machine and Deftones, and you know, Pantera was a huge one. Those are all bands that like I had never heard anything like that. Then when I heard it, like that was what I wanted. So we try to put bands on a show that they're not just seeing bands like us, they're seeing another type of artist that brings a high energy that they still can vibe off of, and maybe then start nerding out over that style. So that's a long way to say like all these goals, all these things that we wanted to do early on. Now, after doing it for 13 years, I can continue doing that even without the band, which I think is awesome. And coming back from the pandemic, I don't want to say we're on the low, but we were at this point where we play back home and we play to the same 50 people, but we didn't go out on the road and play to several hundred people that were stoked about it. So we thought coming back off the pandemic, like no one's going to care. And every show that we've done since the pandemic has been our best shows since 2011. So Corey and I were talking and thinking, down the line, a few years from now, there might be another lull and we're going to be a little bit older. And there's going to, like, right now, it's probably the right time to say, let's go out on our terms and go out on a high. Let's record the best album that we possibly can, put it all on the table. And with this last run of shows, know that every one of those shows matters so much because it's the last time we're going to be playing in that city. So long answer short is we're going to keep doing what we're doing, but probably do it without the band. And then do it with knowing that there's like this brevity in it that's not going to last forever, but it's going to mean a lot. And we've already talked about down the line doing what my old band, the band that I was in the early 2000s does, which is once a year, we get all these bands for that band from 2000 to 2010. We typically get 4 to 6 bands to do reunions that haven't played in sometimes 1 or 2 decades. They do a reunion show. People fly in to see it. It's always like a sold out crowd. We always donate all the money to charity. And it's like this cool way to get these people to like, these people that we grew up with that probably haven't been to a show in a decade or more. Now they have to get a babysitter, but they come to this show and we get to see them again and they see us again. And we like, it's like a reunion almost. We're essentially doing a reunion for hardcore kids, but now those hardcore kids are in their 30s and 40s and all their backs hurt and they're sitting there having a beer instead of mosh pitting. But that's what I see with American Standards as being next is we might take a year or 2 off and then we might come back and just do 1 show a year or something. But even if we don't, we know we want to make these last shows count. We want to make this last album really mean something.
Oh, cool. Any questions, miss?
No, I think you covered it.
All right.
So do I got the job?
Yeah. You're hired.
You don't have to return your face.
Really, my biggest fault is I just work too hard.
Nothing wrong with that. Brandon, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Stay on with me one quick. I'll start some.
Cool.
Come right back. Hold on 1 sec.
Will do.